This is a message I like to give to all sides of the political spectrum. If you reside on the far left and all you care about is Indigenous rights, great. Come and stand with us because we're fighting for our Indigenous Iranian rights against Islamism. But obviously, that doesn't fit their narrative because they can't talk against fundamental Islam, right? I'm talking to the far right now. The far right, white supremacists, go back to where you come from, right? I guarantee you, once Iran is liberated, a huge chunk of us will go back to where we came from. So come and stand with us. Uh, and for everyone else in the middle, this relates to everybody. A free Iran from the spider with its spider web all across the globe, including Australia, or an octopus with the head of the octopus residing within Tehran and its tentacles all across the globe, will mean a better Australia once that octopus is gone. Because when they have all their sleeper cells where they launder money and cash flow and continuously fund terrorism, and the dissemination and recruitment of people to their ideology, you're just amounting to a worse Australia. A lot of people have been telling me, if you want to fight for your nation, go back there, leave Australia on its own. This is Australia's problem too. What you saw in Bondi is a direct result of what we're allowing to prevail in the Middle East.
Ali, thank you so much for speaking to the Australian Jewish News this morning. I know this is an incredibly sensitive and challenging time for the Iranian community here in Australia, and I've had the honor of speaking to your community and of marching with your community. So I think the Jewish community would be particularly interested in hearing how you, an Australian Iranian human rights activist, got involved in this movement and what your feelings are about it moving forward.
First off, I have to say it was a honor and a pleasure to march alongside you, Anna, and it is an absolute honor to once again re-establish the ancient bond that the Persians, the Iranians, and the Jewish community have had. And those who want to make the claim that we are enemies will continuously attempt to persist that narrative, but it's not true. And as we're seeing today, thousands upon thousands of us are marching out in the street to demonstrate that is by far not the truth. And as we're seeing all over the global diaspora community, both the Iranian and the Jewish community. As far as where we started or how we started with our advocacy, at least for myself, I can say I started getting heavily involved back in 2022 when the Islamic forces of the regime occupying Iran murdered Mahsa Amini, as we like to call her, the daughter of Iran, for simply having strands of her hair showing. And what they call the morality police, Gashte Ershad, or in reality, it's just the hijab police, persecuted her, took her in a van, and they killed her. That's when I really got heavily involved. And I told myself enough is enough. I can't deal with this without speaking up about it. Growing up, I was sort of curious in the geopolitical and the internal political affairs of Iran and the Middle Eastern space, but I was never heavily involved. So it was more so after 2022. Of course, many others in the community would have been more involved prior to 2022, starting from the 2009 Green Movement and whatnot, and so on. As far as the relationship between the Jewish community and the Iranian diaspora goes, at least for myself, again, anecdotally from what I've seen, is that post October 7th was when this sort of friendship, this reconciling of this friendship and community bonding came together. Um, Unfortunately, I must say, unfortunately, that's the case, that it had to take October 7th for many of us to understand that, including myself, that we, in reality, we are the only friends and allies that we have for one another, and we can trust one another because we are the only ones who understand each other's plight and the strife that we're in.
Can I just ask you, pre-October 7th, what was your feeling towards Israel?
Again, I was never really involved with that political space. However, growing up as a quote unquote left leaning liberal person, you'd be influenced by the propaganda without even knowing it. So the word Zionist, you just by default associate it with something bad, even
Mm.
though you'd have no clue what it even meant. So growing up, I'd say before my 20s, you just associate Israel with evil, right? As I did. And I was never really involved with the space. I never really identified pro-Palestinian or anything like that. But you just by default, even whilst living in Australia, I've lived in Australia my entire life. You'd assume a place like Australia, you're not entangled by the tentacles of the propaganda, the Islamist and the Marxist propaganda machine. Little did I know that as a non-political person myself, as an adolescent, I still was, you know. So to answer your question, when I was younger, I'd identify with that label of, okay, Zionism equals bad. What is Israel does is bad. Without any research or any education. That explains why the vast majority of individuals, I would argue, who aren't actually part of the Islamist or actual Marxist space, they're just misled. They're just uneducated. And in reality, again, unfortunately, I must admit, it took October 7th for me to really, I like to call it like a big Mike Tyson uppercut to my own face, where I'm like, okay, I need to sit down and look at all of this. I started researching and investigating myself, reading upon ancient history and modern history, Zionism, and of course the connections between Iran and the Judeans and everything in between. And it taught me so much that a lot of the stuff that I thought was a massive lie, including the Israel narrative.
Was this bias against Israel, first of all, was it coming from the Iranian community or your Iranian contacts, or it was somehow being taught to you through the left wing movement you're involved in, or that ideology?
Great question. I think more so the latter, more so from the Marxist Soviet style narrative. Let's talk about the progressive Iranians who fend off Islamism at all costs, and they're very progressive. Many of the feminists, so-called feminists, without even knowing, they're also overwhelmed by the Islamist propaganda, not from 1979, not from Khomeini's narrative of 1979, but rather going all the way back 1400 years ago to the Prophet Muhammad. Prior to that time, the Achaemenid Empire, Persian Empire, and the Sasanian Empire, we've had good relations with the Jewish people. It was only after the Islamic conquest that this anti-Semitism was bred. And then when you sort of translate it to modern history, the 20th century of the rise in Marxism, the peak of Marxism, rather, and of course its alliance with Islamism, you come to understand why this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic narrative comes to play. So when we refer to the Iranian community, a lot of Iranians who are so-called progressives are still inundated with that anti-Israel sentiment without even knowing where it comes from. They just think that way. And I also used to think that way, admittedly myself. So however, the good news is that that paradigm shift is definitely taking form, slowly but surely, and also definitely more so today. That's been amplified today. Iranians are sick and tired of seeing this left wing narrative of labeling everything under Mossad. You have tens of thousands of innocent Iranians that have been massacred by foreign Islamist forces. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is essentially the mega mafia organization, the mega mafia paramilitary organization that acts as a octopus with its tentacles all over the Middle East, but not only the Middle East, all over the West as well, and it is attempting to grow itself. When I say all over the Middle East, let's make some examples. Of course, none other than Hamas in Gaza, none other than the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Judea and Samaria, Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, Iraqi Shiite militias such as Hashd Shabi, Kataib Hezbollah, and many others, and then Syrian Shiite militias, and then the Afghani Fatimiyun Brigade and Pakistani Zainabiyun Brigade, and the list goes on and on and on. And of course, they have their sleeper cells all over the West, including here in Australia. So when I say foreign Islamist forces, every time there is an uprising, the IRGC deploys thousands of these forces to come into Iran and suppress, repress, kill, rape, and do all sorts of take all sorts of torturous measures against Iranians, because simply put, they are seen as the infidel. They don't see them as human or Iranian. They are first and foremost infidels. So when they deploy these foreign Islamist forces, they come into the country, and the leftist agenda is all of tens of thousands of these innocent civilians. They're all Mossad agents.
I can't believe anyone takes it seriously. Like, Israel hasn't got enough to do with its time. It's got to come into Iran in the tens of thousands, rape and pillage, and then come home for Shabbat.
Yeah. I mean, again, I refer to the same point that I always make. If Israel and the Jews really run the world and they run the media, surely they'd do a better job at controlling the narrative in that sense, whilst you have the masses assuming that everything in Iran is because of the Jews, it's because of Mossad, it's because of CIA. It's just contradictory, and it's stupid, to say the least.
We don't even understand the scale of this thing, because it's so full of hate. It comes from a place so full of hatred for the other that it's so unfamiliar to our mentality. We can't even begin to understand. We don't sit around thinking like this. Our community doesn't think like this, as you can see after the 14th of December's atrocity. It's all about reaching out for a better world. And it's really hard for me to comprehend what I'm hearing, because we just don't think like this. So the one thing I've noticed that's been very interesting in the last 2 years, and of course the last 2 years have been extraordinarily challenging and painful for our community as well as your community. And what I've noticed is that what the regime seems to do, and what the narrative seems to be, is a complete gaslighting. So what they say is the Jews want to commit genocide. But what they actually mean is, we want to commit genocide against the Jews. We want to destroy Israel and kill every Jew in the Middle East. Or they'll say the Israel's an apartheid state. What they mean is, we are an apartheid state. We discriminate against all the women of our country, which is half the population, and treat them appallingly. And it goes on and on. So whatever they're doing, whatever they would love to do or are doing, they project onto the Jews or onto Israel.
Precisely. When we look at the IRGC training curriculum, for example, over 50% of new recruits to the IRGC are trained via manipulation and ideological indoctrination. So over 50% of training of the IRGC members pertains to the propaganda machine. And that is why they're so good at it. They've learnt the Soviet-style propaganda and they're implementing it. And they've done a hell of a good job when it comes to controlling the masses and the narrative. And that's why I like to relate it back to the Goebbels and the Nazis with their propaganda and PR style. And so we're seeing that today. Everything that they spread is just a reflection of themselves. You refer to, like, for example, this is just one example, the whole apartheid narrative. The irony is that literally in southern Lebanon, for example, where the Hezbollah headquarters is, Palestinian refugees are treated as second-class citizens in many ways. Nobody talks about that. Yet they have the audacity to label Israel as an apartheid state, and many other labels, of course.
Do you think it's fair to say that Iran is an apartheid state because of the way they treat their women? Is that a fair statement?
Iran, under the occupation of Islam, is a gender apartheid state, no if or buts. Women are half the value of a man by constitutional Islamic law.
And women have driven this movement to a great extent. Is that also a fair statement?
So, since the conception of the Islamic regime, one of the first things they did was implementing the mandatory hijab law. The hijab law, we can say, many refer to it as like the Berlin Wall of the Islamic regime. It's not just a piece of material on your head. It is a symbol in that once you get rid of that, the Islamic regime in and of itself, the entire structure of the Velayat al-Faqih, the Islamic jurisdiction will fall, will crumble like Jenga blocks. And so as a result, many of the uprisings have been put forth by women, because it starts with women and women's oppression. And of course, men stand alongside them every time there's an uprising, particularly the 2022 Woman Life Freedom Uprising. That begun as a direct result of the murder of Mahsa Amini and her hair showing, rather. Yeah.
I was surprised to hear when I spoke to people at the rally that they are very much against Islam. They do not want to stay being Muslims. It's been imposed on them and forced on them. And they said to me that most of the people in that march would leave Islam. Do you think that's a correct statement?
Yeah, so there's many things to say about that. First and foremost, a bit of context. We have to acknowledge, and a lot of people need to understand, that Iran as a nation is the oldest nation in the world and predates Islam by several millennia.
Mhm.
We have our own indigenous religion, and it's called Zoroastrianism. Many call the prophet Zoroaster as the first ever philosopher, actually. It was the first ever religion that adopted monotheism and also brought upon the concept of dualism, that is good and evil, as we call in Persian, Ahura Mazda and Ahriman, which is evil, essentially, the embodiment of evil. So coming to today, when we had the Sasanian Empire in the 7th century, the Islamic conquest took place. And really, ever since then, so 1400 years ago, till today, the Islamists from the 7th century till 2026 have attempted to colonize Iran and Iranians. They conquered us, but they never were able to colonize us. What do I mean by that? They tried to change our language. Couldn't happen. Now, there's many reasons for that. We've had so many philosophers, poets, and artists and fighters, resistors against the Islamic colonization attempt on Iranians. And then coming to today, talk to any Iranian in the diaspora community. I am almost 95% sure, like you won't find one that identifies as being a Muslim. And those who do, they'll be pro-regime. And then within the actual nation of Iran, I can label you some statistics there. So, for example, the two most exponential rising rate of reversions or conversions that are taking place in Iran today is conversions to Christianity. And what I find so remarkable, and as what many of us Iranians would label as the Iranian Renaissance, is this reversion back to our indigenous roots, that is Zoroastrianism. And we practice all of these cultures anyway, but without even knowing, like this all comes back to Zoroastrian roots. In addition to that, the vast majority of Iranians identify as either agnostic or atheist, but they still practice the cultures of Zoroastrianism.
Yeah.
Be it dancing, music, poetry, philosophy, way of life, kindness to one another, good thoughts, good deeds, and many other aspects. Of less than, and this is according to conservative data, less than 30% of Iranians within Iran identify as Muslim. And many of which we have to remember that's because of fear. So a lot of people don't put it out there because apostasy is punishable by death in Iran. And they are one of 12 countries that punish apostasy by death, let alone any other stringent penalties under Islamic ruling. According to the mullahs themselves within Iran, so the clerics, over 50,000 of 70,000 mosques in Iran have been shut down due to unattendance. Like, people refuse to attend. Yeah. And of course, as we've seen in this particular uprising, dozens upon dozens of mosques, all of which are used for military hubs and safe havens for the IRGC, have been burnt down. Remember, this is also a propaganda tool for the regime, as they've done, as Hamas has done as well. They use many of these hospitals, schools, etc., as a means of telling the West, hey, look, this is what America/Israel is doing to us. So right now, the IRGC has actually infiltrated and taken plenty of schools hostage, and there's evidence for this too. And they're actually waiting and they're wanting for Israel or America to attack so they can show the world via propaganda, hey, look, this is what the West is doing to us. And then these Western liberals will fall for that same narrative of, hey, the West is actually the oppressor, the Islamic regime is the oppressed. Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of people tend to forget that it doesn't matter for them. In the case of Bondi, whether it's a 10-year-old little girl or a Holocaust survivor, for them, it doesn't matter whether if there's a dead jihadi in Gaza, for them, it equates to one dead infidel in Australia. They do not recognize sovereign states. They do not recognize Australia. They don't recognize Iranians. They recognize infidel and non-infidel. Period. And that's how their mindset, their psyche operates, rather.
Tell me something. Why should the Jewish community trust this movement?
If we look at it from like a spiritual or religious perspective, we can go back to the Hebrew Bible and acknowledge that Cyrus the Great, the first king of the Achaemenid Empire, the largest Persian empire at its time, is known to be the first ever Zionist, not Theodore Herzl. Obviously, he freed the Jews, abolished slavery, the first ever man in history to abolish slavery, and wrote the first ever charter of human rights. Since then till now, the Jews and the Persians have always been fighting alongside one another. This is a fight of 1,400 years. And it just so happens that once again, unfortunately, today, we are reconciling that ancient bond that once was. I myself only can fathom to trust the Jewish diaspora to work alongside me and my community, because you're the only ones who understand us, and vice versa, I believe. When it comes to a geopolitical perspective and sort of a nationalistic perspective, and rather philosophical one, like you said, our cultures intertwine with one another in many ways. In that, yes, we celebrate life as much as practicably possible. I have seen from your community, and I believe you have seen from our community, every time there's something horrible that takes place, no matter what. I was literally at Bondi the day after the massacre that took place, and I was with a few of the Jewish community, and they were dancing. They were dancing and listening to music, and like they were laughing, and I'm sat there like, this is very familiar to us. So I feel this alignment with the Jewish community every time something bad happens with us. And I'm like, we tend to understand each other. From a geopolitical perspective, we have the same enemy trying to oppress us both from all angles. And that is why they see us as the biggest threat. The fact that we are such good friends now, they hate it.
Of course.
And that is why we must amplify it even more, make it even more astronomical. Make the fact that we love having Israeli flags alongside the lion and sun flag with us. I love that. Make them afraid. Even more symbolic. A lot of people ask me, like, how did you feel seeing, over at least 10,000 people at your march on Sunday? I'm like, it's not even the number of people. For me, it was the symbolism of witnessing the Australian flag, the American flag, the Israeli flag, and of course, none other than the traditional ancient lion and sun emblem of Iran, all together. We are demonstrating to the world that none of us are enemies. There is one enemy and one entity that wants the world to think that we are enemies, and that is the Islamist regime occupying Iran, using Iran as a launch pad in order to perpetuate their Islamist narrative and dissemination throughout the globe. And enough is enough, and we will win this in the end.
It's such music to my ears to hear fellow Middle Easterners speak like this, because we've been literally on an island on our own, pushing back, begging the world to understand us, begging the world to understand the danger that we're in, understanding very well that the 7th was an existential moment where I personally from Australia thought that really that if Iran was to join in on that day, if Hezbollah had joined in effectively, if they'd really coordinated, we were in really big strife. And I was absolutely petrified. I saw another Holocaust coming. So when people talk about a genocide, they're actually talking about what these Islamic extremists want to do to Israel, which is wipe it off the map, well, along with anybody who's living there, quite frankly, including the Muslims, no doubt. They wouldn't care if they went down with them. I wanted to ask you, if you had a crystal ball, how do you see the Middle East, let's say in a few years when, please God, this is all behind us?
Let's say, hypothetically, the Islamic regime in Iran falls tomorrow, and it will. I see a Middle East that once the Islamic regime falls, there will be a ripple effect throughout the entire Middle East, where ancient indigenous ethnic groups will join the anti-Islamist conquest, right? Well, the anti-Islamist conquest that was attempted upon them, be it the Kurds, the Yazidis, the Berbers, the Copts, all of them, right?
Mm.
And this is happening slowly but surely, to the point where we understand what Islamism is, but the West is still not taking it seriously. Unfortunately, I do see a West in the future that may very well be absorbed by Islamism if they don't act now, including Australia. I was hoping that post Bondi, Australia might understand a little bit. But when I see journalists and politicians still hesitant to suggest that this was ideologically driven by a theocratic, violent, hateful, despicable ideology, then we're in a lot of strife. Because the fundamentalists are sitting there and they're laughing. They're laughing, suggesting that, hey, these guys are doing our job for us. No problem. We don't even need to do anything. When I see ISIS preachers on the streets of Sydney every weekend in the middle of town hall preaching violent hadiths, what do you want me to say? This is disgusting, and no amount of rationality can possibly convince me that freedom of speech should cover such preaching of hateful ideology. So my crystal ball would tell me I see a globe that is shifting in the paradigm in the sense of civilizational clashes, in that the Middle East will start to prosper, hopefully, and free itself from fundamental Islamism. But the West, as we're seeing in Europe particularly, is being absorbed by it.
I think we've got enough of our own problems here in Australia, and for us also in Israel, we're very concerned about what's there. So we are really desperate for this movement to come together. And I really do feel very, very optimistic. I don't know if my optimism is naivety, but I see that the Persian people rising together with the Israelis are going to be unstoppable. I mean, that is an incredible force of, let's say, 100 million people who potentially are, they're well educated, they're smart, they have incredible capabilities. And we could see the most incredible things being created out of this disaster.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So much potential in these two nations.
Tell me, Ali, what are you hearing from family and friends back in Iran now?
It's all the same and consistent narrative. Any bit of communication that we've had has been via them calling on landline, not through internet. And it's only been like a 20, 30-second broken communication. We can't call them. And what I find so interesting and horrible, actually, is that the story has always been very consistent with everybody. They're saying the same things. During January 8th, 9th, and post-January 9th, where the massacres took place, all of them saw plenty of blood on the streets within the little streams on the sidewalk, the curb. Water trucks were turning up in the mornings and washing up the blood. And of course, they noticed bodies laid out everywhere, tens of thousands. The morgues are at full capacity, and a lot of people have lost friends and loved ones. I personally know people who have lost others. My immediate family haven't been affected. They have been affected in the sense of, tear gas and being chased or beaten and whatnot. But fortunately, I haven't lost any loved ones. At this stage, I don't know. We're still not in touch with many of them. But the narrative has been very parallel and consistent with everybody that I speak to, and that's the crazy part. These forces. This is how disgusting it gets. They have been infiltrating hospitals with injured protesters, and there are clear-cut bullet shots to the head to ensure that they don't come out alive. And then we have something called Haqqatiri, which is essentially a concept put together by the regime forces. It's a protocol. It's not even a common thing. It's protocol. They do it in order to extract money from the civilians. That is, each time a protester or dissident is killed, in order for the family to reclaim the dead body of their loved ones, they must pay the bullet fee. So Haqqatiri, the bullet fee, which costs around between $7,000 to $15,000 for each bullet embedded within the dead body of their lost loved one, in order to just reclaim their body so they can bury it. And of course, many other things. There has been evidence of potential chemical attacks against civilians. The worst part about this is that they are foreign. I place emphasis on the word foreign Islamist forces that have infiltrated Iran. And many of them, again, this is documented evidence, not only for this uprising, but for most of them, where they take Captagon, which is a stimulant drug used to suppress any means of empathy. So no mercy, straight kill, rape, do whatever they have to do, torture. And this was the same case, of course, with the Nazis, the same case with the Hezbollah forces, same case with Hamas, with what they did in October 7th. So they have no sense of empathy. It is just simply slay the infidel, full stop. And again, this goes back to the narrative where the moment where the West intervenes, and hopefully soon we're going to have military intervention because it's the only way we're going to get out of this, you're going to see a mass propaganda war being perpetuated against us because of this Western imperialism. Yet nobody seems to talk about the Islamic imperialist forces and foreign intervention inside of Iran, killing and slaughtering masses of Iranians within Iran. I see that nowhere from the woke right or the woke left.
How do you explain the fact that the media here, a free media, they can report on whatever they want to report, is in large part ignoring this story?
This is a message I like to give to all sides of the political spectrum. If you reside on the far left and all you care about is Indigenous rights, great. Come and stand with us because we're fighting for our Indigenous Iranian rights against Islamism. But obviously that doesn't fit their narrative because they can't talk against fundamental Islam, right? I'm talking to the far right now. The far right, white supremacists, go back to where you come from, right? I guarantee you, once Iran is liberated, a huge chunk of us will go back to where we came from. So come and stand with us. And for everyone else in the middle, this relates to everybody. A free Iran from the spider with its spider web all across the globe, including Australia, or an octopus with the head of the octopus residing within Tehran and its tentacles all across the globe, will mean a better Australia once that octopus is gone. Because when they have all their sleeper cells where they launder money and cash flow and continuously fund terrorism, and the dissemination and recruitment of people to their ideology, you're just amounting to a worse Australia. A lot of people have been telling me, if you want to fight for your nation, go back there, leave Australia on its own. This is Australia's problem too. What you saw in Bondi is a direct result of what we're allowing to prevail in the Middle East. In the same way that in the 1930s, the West continuously appeased the Nazis, assuming that the Nazis will miraculously become like peace-loving unicorns and hold hands and love rainbows. It took them until 1939 and they invaded Poland for them to understand, oh no, maybe they won't become peace-loving unicorns. Newsflash, that's the same news with the Ayatollahs. This is an Australian problem. You don't take this seriously, you don't take Bondi seriously, you're going to have more of them. Bondi was just a sign of what's to come, and it's just a warm-up. Unfortunately, I must say that.
What would you say to the Jewish community in regards to joining with your movement?
In whatever capacity you have, the Jews and the Iranians, we must absolutely amplify this and reconcile this ancient bond that we have. That is the single greatest threat to the global Sharia movement. It is that simple. They hate it. They hate us celebrating life. They hate us hugging, holding hands, and dancing together. And that is exactly why we will continue to do it. So whatever you can in your capacity, be it attending protests, be it just simply posting up Instagram stories, anything, community stuff, meeting up together, hanging out, do it, because the paradigm is shifting and we are taking back our freedom. We are taking back our indigenous freedom, and I absolutely love it. So continue that friendship, continue that bonding, and amplify it as much as practicably possible.
Ali, this has been truly remarkable for our community to hear from you, and we thank you so much. And from one Indigenous community to another Indigenous community, I feel this energy between these two forces for good. And we wish you the most swift and relatively painless. God knows what's ahead for all of us. I know that Israelis are also bracing for whatever's to come, but we together can do this. We must do this. And I'm so excited to one day visit Iran. I heard it is a stunning country, and we really, really can't wait for something to shift. Every morning I get up and switch on the TV, like I know so many other Jews do, just waiting and hoping that this absolute agony can be over for your community and for ours.
Absolutely, and I couldn't have said it better myself. Bless you, and thank you for everything that you do. And I will be going to Israel soon myself.
Well, we're not going to stop,
Absolutely.
and we're not going to stop until this is over with. And you have the Jewish community in large parts behind you. So we say Am Yisrael Chai, which means the nation of Israel lives, and we pray that the nation of Persia will live on and thrive in the very near future.
Am Israel Chai, Poyanda Iran, long live Australia.
Amen.
Amen.